Hey everyone, Can't Overdo It here. In this video, I'm going to be ranking every piece of media I consumed in December of 2024 from worst to best. And yeah, this one's going to be pretty short. Out of all of these media consumption videos, this is easily the shortest one because not only do I only have 4 entries to talk about, as seen in the right-hand corner, but 3 of those 4 are incredibly niche. And 2 of those 3 niche series are volumes in a light novel that finish the story. So, obviously, there are spoilers, but regardless, here we go, I guess. The worst piece of media this month ended up being Honkai Star Rail patch 2.7. And, I mean, to be honest, I think this patch was just so short compared to the other ones. With that being said, I do think it made the most being so short in its runtime. Sunday was a character who I was a lot lower on than others seem to be, and whilst that does still hold true, I think that this patch did a really good job of humanizing him and, quite frankly, making me give a damn about him. His conversation with Robin at the end of the quest was probably the highlight of the entire patch for me. His interactions with Welt were also really fun, but I think those were more of a boon to Welt than to the former, but I digress. On the flip side, all of the Tingyun stuff was just kind of consistently enjoyable without the same high that the Sunday and Robin conversation had. Obviously, the highlight for her was her last conversation with Madame Yukong, but I think in comparison to Sunday, I was more so just like constantly engaged, especially when Tingyun broke into pieces, which just happens to be a trope that I absolutely love. I also liked that there wasn't really an antagonist this time around. It felt more like playing 2 character quests side by side, which, I mean, to be completely honest, it could definitely be a knock for some people. But personally, I like the formula that they concocted here. All in all, it was really solid, and I mean, looking at the trailers for the new area, I am super looking forward to 3.0. I cannot wait, but unfortunately, Star Rail is the worst piece of media for me this month. And now, we get to the top 3 already. I told you this shit would go fast, y'all. But in any case, at number 3, I begrudgingly have Usonatsu. And I say begrudgingly because I really wanted to have this higher. But as I thought on it more and more, I knew I just couldn't do it. For those who remain unaware, Usonatsu is a coming of age slice of life Yuri visual novel about 2 girls who desire to overwrite their negative memories with positive ones via a quote unquote memory tour, wherein they go to locations with emotional attachment to their past in an effort to get over that past, regardless of their reasons for doing so. It was my first time reading through a Yuri visual novel, and I wasn't disappointed, although, to be completely honest with you, if you do not like slice of life, you will not like this story. You will get bored real quick. However, if you do not mind slice of life, or you actively enjoy it such as I highly recommend the story. I think it's a fairly consistent ride throughout, with chapter 9 being like kind of insane, actually. The amount of peak content that they managed to stuff into 1 chapter is chef's kiss. It's amazing. I can't talk about it enough. I felt like such a nerd, though, when playing through it, because my favorite parts about the visual novel were like the technical aspects, how they managed to set the tone, how they managed to set the atmosphere, the way the music would abruptly cut at points, and the slower songs they used when things got really serious. The presentation of the entire visual novel is just good. But again, they just absolutely hit it out of the park with chapter 9. Speaking of that presentation, though, the general direction of the visual novel is really good. The soundtrack was engaging throughout. It never felt super repetitive or nothing, which is a problem for some visual novels. The visuals, though, I don't even know what to say, man. Out of all of the visual novels I've personally played, and I've got 64 under my belt right now, this one just pops the most. It feels the most modern. The color palette is drop dead gorgeous. The sprites themselves actually move throughout the game. They're very like fluid, I guess is the best way to put it. I'm not even just like talking about like the CGs, no, the I guess gameplay throughout. But to be honest, like this part did it. It took a little bit of getting used to. It was a little bit strange, but after the first few chapters, it just felt natural, and I wasn't bothered by it at all. In fact, I think it allowed for me to become more attached to the characters through seeing not just their emotions, but the change within those. I also like that our protagonist, Kaoru Tachibana, also gets a spray and is shown just about as much, if not even more so, than the other characters, which is a rarity in visual novels. But let's talk about the characters, and they're good. I think that the main four are all pretty solid by the end of the narrative. Rika has a particularly amazing scene towards the end. Mire Sensei is a complex character who, whilst I was very iffy on, and quite frankly, I still am, she did win me over by the end. Shiori was solid throughout, and I think that once her character really gets delved into, she really comes into her own. It just takes her a while to get there for me. But I mean, I'll stop stalling. The only reason that you should read Usonatsu is Kaoru. What an amazing character from start to finish, genuinely. She's got goofy ass quips, monologues that hit a little too close to home at points, and in general just has a charisma about her that really gets the reader on her side from early on. Her backstory is really solid, and I like the way that they handle her conflict, especially in relation to that very backstory. Kaoru's growth through the story is really well done, and truth be told, I'll be talking about her in a future video. If you know, you know. All in all, I love my time with Usonatsu. I really highly recommend it. It's just a shame that it couldn't be higher on this list. Moving on to my top two, and well, I read 2 volumes of Torture Princess this month, and as one may expect, at number 2 is the penultimate entry, Volume 8. And sorry to spoil you, but because of that, at number 1 goes to Volume 9. This is a unique situation where the top 2 pieces of media come from the same series, and more importantly, they come from the last 2 volumes of that series, especially a series as niche as Torture Princess. So I'm gonna do my best to express why I have it so high while dancing around spoilers, so to say, keeping them light in hopes of convincing at least one of you listening to this to pick up this amazing series. So let me talk about Torture Princess as a whole for a moment. Torture Princess has a really strange trend, at least for me personally, of having an alright first half of a volume and a really great second half. This is true throughout, like, the entire series for me personally. But out of the series, volumes 8 and 9 actually break that trend. Both volumes are incredibly consistent reads, with the quality never really letting up. This is apparent in volume 8, but even more so in 9, with it seeming to always just be on the gas. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry to those who have heard this spiel before, but Torture Princess is not at all for the faint of heart. It's an incredibly dark and disturbing read with gore on full display throughout the narrative. But this aspect really adds to the world building for me. Full disclosure, it is a bit much at points. It does feel like the gore is just there for the sake of gore at points in the story, but the tale shown is one that is actively benefited by the world surrounding it. I would go as far as to say that the world building is probably its greatest aspect, like quote unquote writing wise. Torture Princess is, at its core, a character driven story led by Kaita Sena and Elizabeth Leigh Fanu, with the first 2 arcs centering around the former and the last arc focusing on the latter. There are 3 arcs separated into volumes 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then 7, 7.5, 8, and 9. And honestly, those arcs surprised me, leaving me with a feeling of like, where the hell can the story go from here? And yet I wasn't disappointed at any point. Speaking completely candidly, I do think that the series could have ended at volume 6. But personally, I'm glad that it didn't, mainly because of that final volume. Volume 7 is a real low point in the series for me, but it was necessary to set the stage for the final 2 volumes, which were incredible. Now I'm going to talk about those volumes, so I'm going to start spoiling a little bit now. Okay. Holy shit, that last volume. I know I should go through my thoughts on Volume 8 as well here, but quite frankly, any of the good I could say about 8 is absolutely outshined by Volume 9, despite Volume 8 being a very solid 9.5 for me personally. Volume 9 of Torture Princess is everything I wanted from the series. Torture Princess has had a habit of reiterating some of its quotes, but despite that also being present here, I honestly just didn't care. It was utilized in a way that felt deserved, and every time it's time for a story came up, I got actual chills, because I knew some peak was about to go down. Naming a chapter Armageddon is just so awesome, and it delivered. But really, what I want to focus on is the very ending, which I feel like can definitely be controversial if we were ever lucky enough to live in a world where Torture Princess became popular enough to even have its ending be labeled as controversial in the first place, but I digress. Personally, I actually quite liked the ending, and I felt like it was the perfect send-off to the story. At the end of the day, for me, Torture Princess was always a character-driven narrative. I loved the world surrounding the story, but what I always cared about was the relationships between the main cast, and the ending absolutely capitalized on that, leaving me incredibly satisfied. I keep focusing on the main cast here, but even characters like Isabella Vickers, Jean de Rye, Hina, Alice, Lewis, Luke, Vlad, and others managed to keep me engaged with the narrative when the narrative wasn't completely focused on the main people. All in all, Torture Princess has an incredibly well executed dark fantasy aesthetic, an incredible main cast with a very solid side cast, and in a start to finish, that left me perfectly satisfied. I'm glad that I read the series. And so, I leave this entry off with this. It's time for a story. A story of admiration, folly, and love. A story of love, but not of romance. It's the story of a boy who was brutally killed by another, and a story of a monster who cruelly killed others. It's time for a story. A story of repentance, hatred, and dreams. In short, it was a story for the masses. A story of the fate of those who hated and loathed and loved and feared and sorrowed and grieved, and yet made their choices all the same. It was a story that would never be remembered as a tale from long, long ago, for it was a horrible, wretched little anecdote, one that was far too twisted to pass off as a fairy tale. A story in which she and they dreamed of saving the world, a story they dreamed with all their might. It was, in the end, a story that needed to come to an end. Throughout Elizabeth Le Fanu's bloody life, she was accompanied by a foolish servant. The two of them thought that sounded just fine. Okay, yeah, I really didn't read much this month. I know this video was much shorter than the previous ones, but I do plan to keep these going in 2025, so look forward to that, I guess. I got more videos to work on, though, and more content to get down. So, as always, take care, y'all.